Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Well guys, you finally joined me back on the beach. I'm across on the east coast. I'm on a new venue and I'm joined by Ali from N57. He's got a lovely little fishing channel. He's doing really well at the moment, and yeah, we've decided to meet up together. I'm on a beach called Tyninghame Beach. It's only about 4 miles from Dunbar, so just east of Dunbar. If you haven't seen my last videos in Dunbar, you'll know that I've done pretty well there, and I don't imagine this beach will be any different. Never fished this beach before. Ali has never fished this beach before, so really looking forward to it. I'm on my first cast. I'm fishing really light, like I like to do. There's not a lot of surf to talk about, and I think I may have the first bite already. No, just the waves. So yeah, first cast. I'm fishing, as I said, really light today. More because it's situational. You know, there's not a lot of surf. I can afford to fish really light. I don't think the fish are going to be actively feeding today because we've got bright sunshine. There's not a lot of cover for the fish except for the odd breaker. The water is very clear. We've had offshore winds for the past week, so the water's flat calm. I'll give you a really good look around when I get the drone in the air. Scope of the area. But yeah, a lovely little beach this. This beach is sheltered by a rocky outcrop to the south and a rocky outcrop to the left. The beach is a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be actually from seeing it on Google Maps. I thought it was going to be a lot smaller, a lot more closed in, but we've got lots of space here. And I would say that the beach is probably a mile long, easy, a mile long. Dunbar Beach, like I said, is just south of us, and Dunbar Beach is a hefty beach. That was a bite. I'm going to keep a hold of this because I can feel everything on this rod. It may have been the waves again. Definitely a bite, I think. So yeah, sun is forecast all day today, so it's going to be a lovely day. I do think it's going to be a lot harder to catch fish because of it, but try my best. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sticking to the light gear today, so we can move about the beach. Just now I'm just sort of semi-static, being a bit sociable with Ali, getting to know him, and then later on in the day, probably on the outgoing tide, I'll probably get in the surf and do more roaming about and just really going after the fish. But you never know, we may do alright here. Like I said, there is a little bit of surf, so they have got some cover quite close in, and I think the fish will be using that to their advantage. I think we're in. Definite bites. Just look at that rod bending. I'll take you down the beach. Not even got all the cameras set up yet. First fish. Hi! Lovely little flounder, guys. I'll get this unhooked and get it back. Not bad. 5 minutes in the water. Okay, so I'll get this cast out. That hook, that fish was quite deep hooked with the circle hooks. So I've upped the size to the circle hook. I've got a 2.0 now. That was on a little bit of black lug. And I'm using a little hair rig. I'll show you that later on, guys. I'll show you the rigs, everything I'm using later on in the session. But I'll get this out. So just put that out just to where the breakers are forming, or the waves are forming I should say. There's So yeah, I've only got one rod set up just now. I thought I'll get one rod out, get started, and get the camera set up and everything like that, and fish straight away. So yeah, decided to meet up with Ali. I've been following Ali's channel for a little while, and I really like what he does. He fishes nothing fancy. He fishes basic rigs, basic rods, basic setups, and he does really well. So he does what I try and do as well. Not into fancy gear as much as I would like expensive rods. Expensive rods don't catch you any more fish. So this first rod I've got set up, this is the old faithful feeder rod, Shakespeare, 11 foot. Just keeping that bait on the move. Yeah, Shakespeare 11 foot, cheapest chips. I think it was 25, 30 pounds, something like that. I've got a little coarse fishing reel. This is a 3000 size reel, I think it is. £10 braid. The tide is not long started flooding in, so we'll get the full flood of the tide up to high tide, and we'll get most of the outgoing tide as well. Low tide tonight is probably about 7 o'clock in the evening, so it's going to go into darkness. I don't intend fishing into darkness, but we will get a good bit of the outgoing tide. And if this beach is as good as Dunbar Beach can also fish equally as good on the outgoing tide as it does on the incoming tide. In fact, sometimes better. I've only got two baits with me today. I've got frozen black lug and salted mackerel that I've just cut into cubes. I'll go through how I do the salted mackerel as well in the video. So what I thought I'd do is I'd go through how I prepare my salted mackerel. Now, the reason I like salted mackerel is it really is a very versatile bait. I like it for a number of reasons. One, it lasts a long time, even when you're on a session, and you could be in the middle of summer and it won't deteriorate the same as mackerel that's not kept in a cool box, and you know, in the summertime your cool blocks melt and the heat still builds up. But because the moisture's been removed by the salt, it doesn't deteriorate the same, and it still stays firm and it still stays on your hook, and that's really important, I think. Another reason I like using salted mackerel is you can prepare it well in advance, and another reason for its versatility is you can have it all prepped before you come to the beach. No need to take chopping boards, knives, and chopping up mackerel on the beach, or waiting until it's defrosted, etc, etc. And because it's ready to put on the hook, another reason I like it is because I like fishing in the surf. I don't like walking up the beach all the time to my tackle box or my bag. When I'm in the surf, I just want to rebait when I'm in the surf rather than walking back and forward all the time. So yeah, it's a superb bait. Now when I do my salted mackerel, I cut it into little strips, and I cut it into centimetre cubes. So how do I prepare the mackerel? Well, first of all, in the summertime, guys, you go out and catch mackerel for bait. One, it's more exciting than buying it, and two, catching your own mackerel reduces the strain in commercial fishing, and there's enough of that already. Go and catch your own, guys. Don't buy it, and don't add to the cogs that are keeping the commercial wheels turning. Once you've caught your mackerel, you can do one or two things. You can fillet them when they're fresh and then salt them, or you can just put them in the freezer. Don't gut them, they'll dry out a lot quicker if you gut them. Put them in the freezer until you're ready to prepare them for salting. Now, the batch that I'm demonstrating, these mackerel were frozen about 8 months prior to doing this little demo. And all you do, guys, is take your mackerel out of the freezer, just let them defrost very slightly, just enough so you can pass a sharp knife through them so that you can fillet them. Take a fillet off each side of your mackerel, and then what I like to do is salt them in either a plastic container or a glass dish. If you use metal, obviously that can react with the metal and the salt. Put a layer of salt in the bottom of your dish, lay your mackerel into the dish, and then cover that with salt, and then repeat that until you fill your dish with mackerel, or you use the mackerel that you've filleted. Once the mackerel is completely covered in salt, and I use fine sea salt for salting my mackerel, you can use just plain table salt. It's probably a lot cheaper than sea salt. Once your mackerel is completely covered in salt, put it in the refrigerator. Put in the refrigerator for a minimum of 24 hours. After 24 hours, the majority of the moisture is actually removed from the fillets, and when you touch the salt, it should feel damp or wet, meaning that salt is withdrawing the moisture from your fillets. I like to leave it in the fridge for 48 hours just so it firms up even more. The mackerel does rehydrate when it's in the water, no problem, it softens up. So I like to do it for 40 hours. But a minimum of 24 is ideal. Just brush a little bit of the excess salt off, put your fillets on a chopping board, and using a sharp filleting knife. What I like to do is I like to take the belly strip off first so it leaves a sort of rectangular shape that's left on the thick part of the mackerel. The thick part is what I use for cubes, and the belly meat or the belly strip I use for additional mackerel strips. With the belly strips, I just cut that into little fine strips, put to one side, and with that rectangular shape that's left, the thicker part of the mackerel, depending on how big it is, I either cut it in half lengthwise so that each strip is about 1 centimetre thick. If it is really thick, obviously just cut it into thirds again so that each strip is about 1 centimetre thick. Once I've done that, I start cubing it, and again 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre, and that is your cubes ready to go for your hook. Once you've prepared all your mackerel, I just put the mackerel usually into a little sieve off some of the excess salt that's damp, and I put the cubes in one bag and maybe the strips in another, and I'll put fresh salt into that and I'll put it straight into the freezer, and it'll remain in the freezer until I'm ready to use it. These ones were done about 6 months ago and have been in salt all that time, and yeah, they're quite dry when they come out the freezer, but again, they rehydrate in the water really quickly, and they're just a top bait. So give it a try, guys, if you've never done it before, and I hope that helps you out. I might get this other rod set up. It's all ready to go apart from putting a weight on and some bait. I might just stick with one hook, see how it goes. Just put mackerel in this maybe. More chance of a turbot, sticking with fish baits. The species that we're predominantly going to catch today, guys, is flounder, dabs, good chance of turbot, an outside chance of plaice, an outside chance of sea trout, and an outside chance of bass. But predominantly flounder, which I don't mind. This is the first session I've had on the beach this year, 2025. Just keeping that bait moving, winding it in every few minutes. Like I said, I'll go through the rig and all that later on. I'm using a different setup for the circle hooks. Something that I got off of Billy Fishing, who fishes predominantly in Norway. But he comes up with some really good stuff. He makes a lot of terminal tackle himself. And what I'm using today is based on what he uses, although I've modified it a little bit myself. I'm just going to keep a hold of this rod for now. That wind's quite strong. It's a direct westerly wind today. So the way this beach is situated, the wind's blowing directly offshore. So pretty much behind us. I've only got a 1 ounce lead on this. Just keeping it moving. Because it's so calm today and the water's really clear, bright sunshine in the sky, I don't think the flatfish are going to be actively feeding as much as they would normally be, because they've not got the same amount of cover that they would normally have, maybe on an overcast day and lots of surf. What I feel that they tend to do is flatfish, they bury themselves in the sand, their eyes are poking above the sand, and they're just waiting for morsels of bait to pass them by, and you know, they'll have a go of it then, rather than actively hunting, because they've not got the cover above from predators. So I feel that they're more opportunistic, and that's why I've very much chosen to fish as light as I am today, so I can move about and actually find the fish. And when I'm winding the baits in, guys, I'll wind it in almost right until where the surf is breaking on the beach. And I've been doing different casts, doing the same. Cast to my left, wind in, cast out in front, wind in, cast to my right, wind in. Do that a couple of times. If there's nothing there, I'll move. Again, when it's like this and the fish are not actively feeding, and they're burying themselves in the sand. I do feel that they don't follow the tide in the same. So you're basically trying to cover fish that are just, you know, static. Just keep that bait moving. And I'm getting bites. Yeah, good bites. I don't want the fish to sit on the bait too long, otherwise it's going to get deep hooked. And if you deep hook with a circle hook, it's even worse than a J hook. Yeah, this fish is on. You can feel this fish fighting all the way because of fishing an ultralight rod. Ah, a little flatty. On the mackerel bait this time. Lovely little flounder. Circle hook right in the corner of its chops. This should come out really easy. Look at that, perfect. Thank you, buddy. Get another couple of pieces of mackerel, a couple of cubes, put that on. Brilliant! Bites. Still fishing the 2 rods, 3 hooks in total. But Ali's had his first fish. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You need to go and check his channel out. I will put a link of Ali's channel in my description so you can go and check his channel. And honestly guys, check his channel out because he really deserves a watch. And he travels a lot around Scotland. He fishes at least once, twice a week. So yeah, go and check him out guys. Hopefully that's the first of many today. Ali's fishing 3 rods. I think he's got 3 hook flappers on the majority of his rods. I think he's mostly fishing mackerel baits and black lug at the minute. Right guys, so I'm just going to have a little go on the surf here. Little one up, one down. Got black lug on the top dropper and some mackerel bait on the bottom. Both circle hooks. keep my rod up above the surf. And feel for the bites. Perfect. It has gone a little bit quieter. I did expect that to happen. The sun's getting a bit higher in the sky. Obviously there was quite a bit of action on the sort of first hour of the flood tide. And then after that it's just tailed off a bit. Ali's just had his second fish, a real surprise fish, and I'm not going to say what it is again because I don't want to take away his thunder from his channel. You need to go and check it out to see what he caught. But yeah, stunning fish and a real surprise for this venue. I did say at the start that there was an outside chance of it. And yeah, he saw his rod rattling and he knew it wasn't a flounder, and it was perfectly hooked with the circle hooks that he's using right in the corner of the mouth. Brilliant. So yeah, we're so slowly getting pushed up the beach here. I think we've got another 3 hours until high tide. I did try a little bit in the surf. I was getting knocked about too much. So yeah, I'm just sticking this out just now, semi-static, still winding it in really slowly, just to keep the baits moving. So guys, another little update. Still no more fish. The tide has definitely started to turn. Probably about 15 minutes since the tide turned, and I thought I'll just go through my rig and the setup. This setup is the one that I caught both flounders on right at the very start of the session, and the rod is an 11-foot feeder rod. It's rated 30 grams, so an ounce, and this little bomb weight is an ounce, I think. Yeah, this one's an ounce. I've been chopping and changing between 3/4 and an ounce. The reel, like I said, this is a 3000 size reel, a freshwater reel, and obviously because it's freshwater, when I get home I'll have to rinse it off as well as the rod, as it's not built for sea fishing. And I've also dropped the rod in the water, and it is winding a bit stiff. There's obviously some sand in there, so definitely need to give that a good rinse and strip when I get back home. The line that's on the reel is 10-pound braid, but it's ideal for this. It's ultra fine, and this is what I use for fishing really light in the surf. So the braid, that goes through to a little shock leader, which is about 6 foot long, 10-pound fluorocarbon, and I've joined that using an FG knot. I like the FG knot because it's super fine, and so that's a joining knot from the braid to my little shock leader that I've got, and then I've just got a figure of 8 loop on the end of that 10-pound fluorocarbon. If you haven't seen the last video when I fished at Dunbar, which is, like I said, it's just a short distance from here, I had a cracking session, I really did, and I will leave a link of that in the description so you can have a look at that. I used the exact same setup, 2 hooks, but today I'm using something slightly different on the hook setup. The last time I just used plain circle hooks, which did the job, but after watching Billy's fishing, like I said, he fishes in Norway, but he does come up with some really good stuff, and I've actually got little hair rigs or little hairs on the end of each circle hook so that the bait is free from the hook. I've got one for worm baits and I've got one for using the cubes. So although I copied Billy's idea, I have adjusted it so it is a little bit different to Billy's in that I can reuse that hair if I need to change the hook. Where Billy, he ties his hairs directly onto the hook, so if he's going to change his hook, you'll have to cut the braid here and use a new one. The way I've done it is I can reuse it when I change the hook. So guys, when I make the rigs, I try and make them as versatile as possible. So the rig body itself for this ultralight way of fishing on the shore, I use 10 pound fluorocarbon for that as well. I take about a metre of 10 pound fluorocarbon, I tie a loop knot in one end, and the loop knot that's on the end, that joins onto my shock leader by a loop-to-loop connection. I'll put a link in the description of how I tie the loop knot and how you use it to join two lines together, and it's one of the best ways to actually join mono to mono. And plus, when you join mono to mono using two loop knot connections, you can actually take your rig off and reuse it again rather than cutting it when you finish. So it's not a fixed join, it's just two loops joined together. And I don't know if you can see that, really small. You just push the two knots together and that slackens off, and then you can run the rig through that loop. Just make sure when you tie your loop that you do make it big enough that you can pass the terminal tackle that's on your rig through it so that you can take it off and wrap it up when you finish. And what I use to make my little snoods, or in this case it's sort of working like a two hook flapper, but versatile, that you can adjust it to one up, one down. And what I use for that is I use Guru float stops, and these are small ones, and these grip the line really tight. Once I've done the loop knot on the end here, from the opposite end, on the open end of the line, I'll slide on one float stop, which is going to be at the top of the rig. I then put on a little micro swivel or small swivel, and then I put two float stops up against that, and that way that this can run really freely and it spins round the line, and it's called a helicopter rig. But for sea fishing terms, it's a flapper rig, and you can slide that almost up to the knot if you want. This is about 6 inches away from that, and then further down I then put on another float stop, and then I put on another micro swivel, and then another two float stops to jam that in place, and that's the second dropper or second flapper. Now, as you can see with this one, it's close to the weight, so this one is acting as a one up, one down, so one hook above your weight and one hook below your weight. And yeah, so depending on the distance that you want between your snoods or your swivels will depend on how long you want your actual snoods themselves, which is what the hook's attached to. So there's the first one, and on this one, the top one, I've got a little bit of silicone rubber. Yeah, you slide it up onto your swivel, and that just acts as a little kicker, and it reduces tangles in your line. The bottom one, I haven't bothered doing that on the bottom one. That's just straight onto the swivel and then onto the hook. This top hook, this is a 2.0 actually. It's a 2.0, it's a Tronics Pro circle hook, and I'm using the worm bait on the top hook, and you can see my little hair rig there. So I've made loads of these up, and these are the ones that I got the idea from Billy Fishing. He uses little hairs like this, and the little hook that's on the end there, this is just from cheap fine wire Aberdeen hooks, and I basically cut the bend of the hook off, and this is roughly about a centimetre, and that is 5mm that hook. I just bent that over, just rubbed the little cut end with a file just to smooth it off, and that's the hook. This is for the worm bait. I've then got some braid that attaches to the hook, which is doubled over. I think this is £80 braid I use for this. Might be 50, you can use 50 or 80, whatever you've got. So I'll have my doubled over line, okay, and I'll leave enough to work with so that I can finish it. And I'll probably have maybe 6 inches of doubled over braid. And all you do to attach it to the hook is just put the loop through the eye of the hook, put it over the hook and pull it, and that attaches the hook on, and then you'll have your 2 lengths of braid. I then use these cheap float stops. These are made of silicone, okay, so they're quite soft, and these are dirt cheap. You can get like 3 lots of 20, I think it is, a couple of quid. These are all cock, and because they're silicone, they're really soft. I slide one of them onto the doubled over braid, which is there, you can see it. It's like that sort of brown colour, yeah. Slide that down to the bottom towards that ready-made hook. I tie a figure of 8 knot in the doubled over braid, trim the ends, and once it's doubled over, this total length is about 6 centimetres long, and you can make that as long as you want. I wouldn't do it too long, just in case your worm wraps around your line. You know, the fish don't feed normally on whole worms when they're out at sea. You know, they're fishing on bits of worms that's getting churned up in the surf, tails. So I only use small sections of worm, and in this case I'm using black lug. And obviously that's the doubled over line that you can see. And to make your hair, all you do is get your circle hook, put that through the loop, slide your float stop up towards the knot, and this is not coming off. That's not coming off that barbed hook. And then you can put your worm on. The other hair that I've used on the end hook, this is for the cubed mackerel. And instead of putting a hook on the end, I use what's called a rapid stop, and I'll show a little picture here. These rapid stops, these are used for putting boilies on and coarse fishing and all that sort of thing, keeping sweet corn on hair rigs. Again, doubled over braid. This braid is only £10 braid in this instance, because it needs to be quite fine to get it through the little quick stop or rapid stop. Again, doubled over line, tied on the end, tie a figure of 8 knot, and this is only about 3 centimetres long and enough for about 4 cubes of mackerel. You put that through the loop, the doubled over braid loop, and slide up the float stop all the way to the top. You can either use a baiting needle, or you can use just a little small needle. Now, I did say that this is quite a versatile rig. Because I'm using float stops on the rig to do the snoods, I can make this from a 1 up, 1 down to just a 2 hook flapper just by sliding the float stops up the line and then make it into a flapper rig like that. But today I'm just sliding it down to the bottom, and it's more of a 1 up, 1 down, almost like a Wessex rig. Just leave a little gap so that your swivel can spin freely, stops it getting tangled, and that's the rig, guys. Really simple, really easy. I may do a better tutorial on this. Obviously I'm rushing through this because I'm on the venue, I'm fishing, and I want to get fishing. So guys, I may as well show you how to bait it up, because I'm going to be re-baiting this rig and getting it out. So I'm going to start off with the mackerel, and this is a little baiting needle that I use for this. Just keep it in my pocket, put that into the whole end of the rapid stop, pick up some tubes, a mackerel. You can do this through the flesh side and then through the skin side, or vice versa. I'm going through the flesh side, then through the skin. There's one. Two. A little skinny one, so I can get 4 on this. There's 3. There's 4. You can see the rapid stop pushing through the end, so I just grab that and pull it through so that it acts as a little T-bar so that the cubes don't come off. And that's that. You see that's right close to the hook. Yeah, that hook, by the way, is a size 1 circle hook. So a little section of black lug, put on a baiting needle, doesn't need to be fancy, slide that up towards the end. I then take the hair for the worm end with a little hook that's made, put that in the end of the baiting needle, if I can see it, should have my glasses on, just like that, a little bit of tension on the line, slide your worm bait of choice, in this case like I said it's black lug, just ease that over the bend of that little hook, slide it up the hair, take your little hook off the end of your baiting needle, just turn the hook round, put it through the little head part of the worm, and you can just slide that bit of worm down. And that's all you need, guys. The hook's proud, the fish come along, they suck that whole worm in, they can't nibble at that worm without taking the worm into its mouth, because there's a piece of braid going all the way through that. If you just nipped that onto a piece of section of worm and a fish ravaged the worm, they would just rip it to pieces, and you'd be left with a little stump on your hook that's not going to catch nothing. So in theory this could catch you more fish. Well guys, that's it. Starting to pack up now, lights fading. It's been a fantastic day. Only 2 fish for me, 3 fish for Ali, 3 species Ali had. He's done really well. Could have been better, but I think to ask for it to be any better with the weather that we had, bright sunshine, crystal clear water, not a lot of surf, I think we've done really well, especially Ali getting 3 species, absolutely fantastic. So guys, check out Ali, N57 Fishing. I'll leave a link in the description like I said. Thanks so much for joining me guys, and I'll see you next time on Piscator UK.